drift through time and space where real life truths take their place. Step inside this narrative flow. Let your mind expand and grow. Welcome to the Morsels of Fiction. Illustrated lines of deception. Bigger lines of small creations. A portal to imagination.
Welcome to Morsels of Fiction, where we savor the small, powerful stories that leave a big impression. I'm Matthew Posey, and this podcast is all about short stories, from the haunting and strange to the tender and thought-provoking. Today's episode dives into Carmen Maria Machado's The Husband Stitch, a story that has captivated readers with its blend of sensuality, urban legends, and haunting metaphors. Before we begin, I want to invite you to give this story a read. If you haven't already, while this podcast is free to openly discuss its details, I have to say no summary or analysis could ever do it justice. If you would like to hear my take first, great. But I also encourage you to circle back and experience the story firsthand. Trust me, it's worth it.
Welcome to the Morsels of Fiction.
What makes The Husband Stitch so fascinating is how it layers small horror stories within its larger narrative. Our protagonist, a young woman whose life unfolds in sensual and mysterious ways, is also a storyteller. From the very beginning, her world is rich with fairy tales and urban legends. She seems endlessly fascinated by the lessons horror stories tell. Take the scene at the lake. She's sitting with a boy, and they're exploring each other. But her mind wanders. She casually imagines a hooked-handed man lurking in the late-night fog, a fleeting thought that adds tension to the otherwise tender moment. Or consider the way she talks about Bloody Mary, not as a children's game or as a story, but more as a story about disturbing the peace of an old woman. Even as a child, her mind was steeped in horror. She describes walking through the supermarket, seeing potatoes in the produce section, and insisting to her mother that they were bloodied severed toes. These moments tell us something crucial about her. She has always lived on the edge of fear and fascination, constantly drawn to stories that blur the line between fantasy and reality. This fascination with horror creates a striking contrast to the girl herself, sensual, alive, and deeply human, and it sets the tone for the unsettling events that follow. Now let's talk about the green ribbon. If you're unfamiliar with the story, the protagonist wears a mysterious green ribbon tied snugly around her neck. It's mentioned repeatedly, especially during her sexual encounters with an older man who eventually becomes her husband. The ribbon, she says, cannot be touched. It's a hard limit. A rule she never explains. It's just always there, tied with a little bow, unassumingly yet ever present. As our relationship grows more intimate, the ribbon becomes a symbol of her boundaries. Her husband is fascinated by it, but she remains firm. Don't touch it, she says, over and over. And yet, here's the thing. Her husband has everything he could ever want. She loves him, gives him herself to him completely, and even shares her darkest secrets and moments with him. But the ribbon, that remains hers, and that drives him mad. The obsession reflects a dynamic we see often in real life. Too often, women's boundaries, whether physical, emotional, or legal, are dismissed as obstacles to be overcome. Take, for example, the rising maternal mortality rates in the United States. A study from the Tulane University reveals that states with strict abortion laws also see higher rates of maternal death. These laws prioritize control over women's bodies, ignoring their safety and autonomy. Machado's story mirrors this social greed, this inability to accept a woman's no without demanding to know why. The ribbon isn't just a boundary in her marriage, it's a boundary she carries into motherhood. After having a baby, the story is often about the ribbon shift. What was once an intimate secret between herself and her husband becomes a forbidden mystery to her child. There's a pivotal moment when her son, still a baby, innocently touches her ribbon. She doesn't panic, perhaps because he is small, a fleeting gesture, but as he grows older, she becomes more guarded. By the time he's 12, the ribbon is an unspoken taboo. When he asks about it, she distracts him with dark fairy tales, stories about the undead children, angels, and ash, she says. This change in dynamic reveals something crucial. The ribbon is no longer just a symbol of sexual boundaries. It represents something deeper, a secret so personal, so tied to her identity, that even her child cannot know it. But why the shift? Why does her relationship with her son make the ribbon even more untouchable? Perhaps because the ribbon is tied to trauma, something she hasn't resolved, and something she can't risk revisiting? Her silence becomes a shield protecting her, not just from others, but from herself. Ultimately, we learn that the ribbon is tied to a deeply personal horror. Throughout the story, she's shared urban legends, but one stands out as uniquely hers. A tale about parking a car with a boyfriend and being attacked by a hooked-handed man escaped from an insane asylum. Unlike the other stories, this one ends abruptly. I don't remember what happens next, she says. This silence feels deliberate, as if the memory is too painful to recount. And here's the detail that sets it apart. This is the only moment in the story where the ribbon isn't mentioned. It's subtle, but it hints at something profound. The ribbon may be a response to this attack, a way of protecting herself from a world that has already hurt her once before, perhaps? In the story's climactic scene, her husband, again teasing at the ribbon, yet again crossing that boundary. He's desperate to know its secrets, and for the first time, she allows it. He unties the bow greedily, and as she assures him of her love, her head falls from her shoulders. The reveal is shocking, visceral, and strangely tender. It's not just the end of her story, it's the end of her autonomy, the ultimate price of crossing her boundaries. What makes The Husband Stitch such an incredible read is how it balances beauty and horror. Machado's prose is lush, her character is vivid, and her use of folklore masterful. It's the kind of story that stays with you long after you've finished, lingering like the shadow of a dream. If you haven't read it yet, I hope the episode inspires you to pick it up. And if you have, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did the ribbon mean to you? Thank you for joining me in this journey through Carmen Maria Machado's The Husband Stitch. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with a friend. Until next time, I'm Matthew Posey, and this has been Morsels of Fiction.
Story. Oh wait, there's more ahead to unveil. Imagination, endless sea.